This is Our Blood Runs Black, a podcast honoring the people, the faith, and the coalfield legacy that shaped generations.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Marcia Self, and this is my co-author, Rebecca Reiner White. And we're here today to start our new podcast in regard to Our Blood Runs Black, which is the book that we wrote about our dads. And in the June 21st, 1983, mine explosion at McClure 1. Methane and coal dust explosions are the most devastating accidents in coal mining. We've learned that the hard way. It was a devastating night, but from this night became a lot of honor and friends and helping one another. And the brothers of the coal mines do have a brotherhood, and they had decided there'd be no man left. And so these are the men here at the table today, and these guys are actually have been at McClure 1. This is Becky. She may want to say a few words first, and then we have Norman Lewis. And he worked at McClure 1, and he is also recovery, but he actually also designed and built McClure 1.
I just wanted to say that my father was in the McClure 1 mine disaster. He was one of the fatalities. He was set to retire on Friday. He had worked 40 years in the coal mines, and the accident happened on Tuesday. So he was killed 3 days before he was scheduled to retire. And Marcia called me up and asked if I wanted to participate in writing about the explosion and the accident. And we got together and wrote a book, hoping to preserve our heritage, highlight our culture, and honor our miners. And I just want to thank you all for being here. We feel very fortunate and very blessed that you're here with us today.
Just give us a little bit of your background, where you're from and where you grew up, and just a small dose of your life until you become the coal miner.
I'm Norman Lewis. I was born in Harlan, Kentucky. That's where my parents lived. They moved to Clintwood, Virginia when I was younger. I grew up in Clintwood. I went to school, played local sports. Always see the men coming and going from work. And it always intrigued me. When I was a kid, if there were old openings around the mines, old abandoned mines, we'd always go look inside, looking for fossils, looking for things that might have been left behind. So it was a culture we grew into. And then after I got out of high school, I was waiting for the draft. There's nothing else to do. And a friend said, "Hey, you want to start working around outside mines and find out what it's like?" So I did. And it wasn't a permanent job. It's something I would go with him. We'd be outside checking on his equipment and everything. And then finally, another good friend said, "I've got the perfect job for you. You need to go underground." And I worked there for around 3 years. And decided I wanted to go to work for Clinchfield, the bigger company. And applied and went through the process. And first got hired with Clinchfield at their Moss 3 operations. The Moss 3 operations were huge mines. They ran anywhere from 12 to 18 feet high. And I had worked in what we considered high coal, but it wasn't over 6 feet. Went to work in that mine. It was like being inside of a gymnasium. It was so high. Those mines did have gas liberated in them, but there was so much air movement, you never knew the kind of gas.
So would the gas go up that high?
It would keep going, but you couldn't get 18 feet off the bottom rock to really know what the gas was. You could take a gas reading at the level where you were, but what was up at the ceiling at that time, we didn't. Coal business got bad, and it ran through slumps, and Clinchfield had to downsize because they weren't selling their coal. And I went back to work at another small operation, got laid off. Went through the process through the union to panel. And the only place I really paneled was the new shaft mine that was going in, because that was where the future of Clinchfield at that time was going to be. They hadn't even called it McClure 1 then. It was at Caney Creek. They were calling it Caney. And there was a company there called Tyson Mining, and Tyson Mining was doing the sinking of the shaft. I got the call to go to work, and when I went to work at McClure, Tyson's people were still on the property, and we worked side by side with them because they still weren't finished with all the work that had to be done to get a return shaft, an intake shaft, and a slope done. And we worked back and forth. Though we were in different labor unions and different companies, we still worked together. And here's the first real example of the bond that's made with people underground in a dangerous situation. It didn't really matter whose side you were on or which side you were on. When you got there, you were all together, and you worked for the safety of each other. Whether you were Tyson or Clinchfield or Roberts and Schaefer or whoever else, that was one of the other companies that was on site, or if you were a Clinchfield foreman.
And we always heard about the miner's bond was sort of like the firefighter's bond or the police officer's bond, that you guys did have a bond with one another underground at all times.
Well, you had to, because you had to watch out for safety for someone else, and you had to know someone was watching for you. And it just, that's something that was a learned experience. You couldn't just say, "Oh, it's going to happen." No, you had to learn it. It's probably like military experience and all. The new person had to work their way in. They had to show by their actions that they were worthy of being called buddy, that they were worthy to watch out for someone else. And it made a special bond. And some of those bonds, through strikes and everything else, the bonds were weakened. But I don't think the bonds ever break. They're still there. You may be on opposite sides, and it may be a heated discussion or a heated strike or whatever has to be done to manage, but the bond with the people is still there.
Yes. Well, when you go home, your neighbors and the people that live around you in your town are some of those miners also.
Oh, yes.
So you're a bond that way too, not just underground, but at your local grocery store, say.
That's right.
You would run into the other miners that may not be what you are exactly.
One of the men that's in this book that lost his life lived a quarter mile from where I live today. I would see him on weekends. I would, of course, see him at the bathhouse, but I'd see him and his family going in and out. We knew all their kids' names. They knew us. And I think the other guys will tell you the same way. Everybody in town, you knew who the miners were. Some of them didn't have bath facilities or ways to change clothes, and they went to the grocery store with black coal dirt on them. Others had the opportunity to work in a mine where they could change clothes, and you couldn't really tell except for maybe the black rings around their eyes where the coal dust settled in their eyelashes if they were even a coal miner. But they instantly knew, the coal miner when they met, because of the bond. You know that feeling.
Yes.
So did you actually share times together, like I guess at holidays and everything? Would you guys have little dinners or something at the mine together to even get closer with your boss? Or I think Becky's dad was going to have dinner with you guys that week also, and was going to come down and have a dinner together.
You did that. Birthdays were always a big celebration underground, because by the union contract, the person that had a birthday, if he worked, he got paid 3 shifts. He got a triple time shift. So it was their responsibility to bring out all the treats for the birthday underground, and everybody would eat lunch. So you'd bring fried chicken or burgers or something like that, and everybody participated in it, brought it out. You didn't bring gifts, but you fellowship.
Mm-hmm.
You had a half hour for dinner, but the foreman and other people, we made a little advantage so we could take just a little bit more time so that we could enjoy it. And that's the camaraderie. And it carried outside. There at McClure, we had horseshoe pits. And in the afternoons when shift changed, guys that came out a lot of times from day shift wouldn't leave until their horseshoe match was over. And then for the evening shift or the next shift following would be sitting in line or waiting in line for their turn to throw horseshoes. And there was a lot of joking and to try to take some of the pressure off, because we knew the inherent dangers of being underground. It's something that you had to learn, but once you became one of that brotherhood, you never lost it.
That's something else I wanted to ask you about was the heat and the gas. You guys knew, all the workers there knew that it was a gassy hot mine, didn't they?
Yeah. Now, there's two different terms, gassy and hot. Hot was a colloquialism that, pardon my French to use a big word, but that's what coal miners, when they talked about a mine liberating a great deal of methane, they called it hot. It wasn't the temperature. The temperature in the ground stayed about the same year round, 58 to 60 degrees. And then if you were in an area where there was mechanical equipment working, the temperature would elevate simply because the electric motors running, the oil that drove the machinery, of course it's going to get hot and it gave off heat the whole time whether the machine was running or not. So that temperature was elevated, and that wasn't what men were talking about. When they talked about hot, they knew how much gas was being liberated, how much gas was you find on your methane detector or your flame safety lamp. And that's, and a lot of people would misunderstand that, think, oh, it's hot down there. Doesn't even do with temperature. It was all about the gas.
And McClure had a reputation for being a hot, gassy mine.
Yes.
Or a
McClure-
gassy mine.
McClure had it not only a reputation, it set the standard.
Yes.
For years,
Day one.
except for some of the bigger mines that were in Buchanan County, the really deep mines, McClure set the standard for tons of methane just blown off. I mean, on average, 3 million cubic feet of methane a day. That would heat a lot of houses had it had some way of capturing it and not just letting it blow off into the atmosphere.
Right.
Well, let's get down now to a little bit of when you and Benny were beginning there, and explain to us how you build a shaft mine. And what really got to me is what you start with to build a shaft mine. That sort of got me interested in learning more about it.
Well, and I had a little insert there. Did you and Benny work together at the same time?
We were there
We were
at
there.
the same time, but as far as being on his crew or his being at my crew, no. We passed, we saw each other.
Yeah.
But that area, you would have to realize that it wasn't just, we were concentrated at the return shaft. That covered 1.5 miles up the holler where the prep plant was being built and the slope belt was coming out and the slope track was going in. So it was enormous, the amount of work area that was there.
Yeah.
And today, some of the questions you're asked, we're concentrating on a 20-foot wide hole, 460 feet in the ground. And it started out, you would, of course, they would drill holes in it so that whatever the specified depth was, set off dynamite. Then they would take a machine called a mucker, and it would go in and pick up the loose rock, dump it in a cart behind it, and keep going, and then it would go dump that out. And as it went down, they shored up the sides. That means they held the sides together. They put in a concrete wall, and they had a platform that moved up and down on a hoist. That was the first thing they did was install a hoist. These were huge machines that came from Germany. They had come out of many mines that had worked over there, and the cables that they used to lift enormous weights were huge, maintained to the point that they glistened. The hoist operator knew what his cable looked like. He examined it every day on every shift, multiple times, because people's lives depended on whether his cable was not. Yeah, most of them, what would you say, Benny? 3-inch or better? And the main hoists?
Yes. On the main hoist.
And when we, as Clinchfield people, got on the property, they were down to where they were pouring the final concrete at the bottom of the shaft. But that didn't mean everything was ready to go. There were by far, there was no equipment, or we had to put in a special ventilation. We had fans that sat 400 feet up on the surface and went down, looked like huge corrugated pipes, 6 feet in diameter, that would go down, and that's what kept the air circulating, fresh air down, and then it came out. And we had to have their expertise because we hadn't worked in high environments. You figure, oh yeah, it's a high environment. Well, if you're halfway down that shaft, you're actually 200 feet off the ground or more. These men were used to working in that kind of environment, and they had to teach us. Here again, we had to put our trust in them to keep us safe in that high environment, though it was underground the whole time.
I just don't think people realize, and even I haven't, I've been underground, but I didn't realize how huge a mine is underground. And as someone tried to explain it to me, to imagine Walmart, that was the best imagination I could have with the mines. Walmart's nothing compared to what a mine is underground, but you've got your pillars and your sections, and that gave you a face and a front down here. That sort of gave me an idea, but the magnitude of how huge they are underground and what all they run under. I know one of the men in the book, Wade Mullins, had worked under the McClure River. And then, that weekend he got baptized in the McClure River. And so he always felt safe because he would go underground and under that same river that he'd just been baptized under. So he felt protected, and that people just don't think of that when you're driving down the road or even at Fremont, I don't think there's a mine underneath me there. I never did. I just didn't think about it.
I can't get over the fact that the mine is under a river. I just didn't know. I mean, I never.
In the area where your dad and your dad were working, they were actually under Caney Creek. And that's part of the reason that the mine liberated so much methane. You were under the water table where normal drinking water and everything is. Well, that water table held that methane in check. Once we went under that and took it out, it made a vacuum. So we pulled the methane down. The methane came to us. And once you're under the water table, some places in McClure where the water dripped, it was pure salt. It's like you were under the ocean, though it wasn't. It was coming through salt deposits. You would see stalactites come off the roof where the water dripped, and that's what it looked like. They wouldn't be huge like you see in Mammoth Cave or Luray Caverns.
Bristol Caverns.
But they would be this long or better, and they would be, once they dried, they were pure salt. I don't know what else was with them, but if you touched it to your tongue, it tasted like salt.
I wonder if they have sulfur
And
in them.
an inquisitive coal miner would do that and say, wonder what this tastes like.
Yeah.
But that's the things that you do. That's the things that builds camaraderie. Knowing what hot meant, and knowing what gassy was, and knowing where you were. At the time of the explosion, it was a close 2 miles from the bottom of the elevator. But at that time, there were 64 miles of airways in that mine. 64 miles. It wasn't 164 miles, but you say you went to where the explosion was, you had 4. At least 4. That's 8 miles of airways there. And that's not counting the other five or six sections that we had going at the same time in different directions. And that's all, and when you're standing on top, it's a pasture field, or it's a road, or it's a gas station. But it's all got, 400 feet plus underneath it is an active mine, an active working mine.
Right.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, I know vacation was coming up, and you guys were excited, I'm sure, and Becky's dad was getting ready to retire in 3 days. Some unusual things had happened to some of the other miners that week. One of them had a toothache, really didn't want to go in, but he did. And just, you learn so many little things that we've been able to put in the book and share with people, that how lives could change. And with Kat.
It was very interesting. The miners saw her shoveling on the belt line and saw her working so hard. So when the buggy position came open, the one person who said that he got that position gave it up so Kat could be on the buggy. And that was the position she had the day that she died. She got that buggy position, and the person that went to another section had survivor's guilt.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
to try to deal with that.
And that's a good example of the bonding and the brotherhood,
Right.
or sisterhood. Even though people look down upon women being in the mines, I gotta say it. We had women down there at roof builders just as good as the men did. Drove shuttle cars just as good. Ran a mine just as good as the men did.
Yeah.
I always heard we're better welders.
I wouldn't know.
I'm meticulous. Yeah.
Well, you probably are because you well broken heart. So,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
And here again, my joking is another sign of what coal miners did. You did that to cover the nervousness. You may play a prank on somebody outside that you would never do a prank inside.
No.
You may laugh and do things where they set up a soft drink down and you pour salt in there or something, but not on the ground. It was serious when you got in there, and you had to laugh. A lot of things that were insignificant that people on the surface would think, that's not funny at all. We would, and it's because of the pressure. There's no doubt men who worked with us at that time who were involved either on shift or recovery, PTSD. That was the thing no one talked about. We all have it, whether we remember it or not. We all have that, and we all suffer from it. And here again, that's another bond that we have with other people coming across.
Our dad experienced PTSD
Yes, I
the rest of his life.
Yeah.
He saw a counselor every month. But since we're underground now, let's start talking a little bit about the long wall section that was coming in. And I guess the company wanted it in by the end of the week.
Yeah.
So there was some
We
pressure
had
about the
talked
long
about
wall.
this before, like when the engineers put McClure on the books, that time metallurgical coal, which is what the job on scene was. High fixed carbon, it was great for making coke, and coke is the essential heating element to make strong steel. When they put it on the books in the early 70s, coal was $80, $90 a ton. When we got ready to start putting the long wall in, it had already dropped down to about $60 a ton. Clinchfield knew that they had the premium coal in the world at that time for the monies that they put down, the millions, $70 or $80 million per the shafts and things that they did to try to recoup it for their stockholders. Also for the men that worked there, so that they would have a paycheck and could support their families. And the long wall was one of the ways, because once it started, it turned out huge amounts of coal compared to what a normal conventional section or a minor section would do.
So describe what the long wall is compared to the block and pillar style of that.
Room and pillar meant you would cut forward into the virgin earth, 16 to 20 feet, then you come out and bolt it back. And that was a continuous process. And after you went a preset distance, you would stop and turn left or right. And people went, well, why would you stop, turn left or right? Those pillars held up the roof. They also made an opening that allow air to ventilate through. So to take dust away, gas away, if you had smoke away or whatever it would be. And that was thing, and it was a slow process because you got 20 to 16 feet, and then you had to quit and go somewhere else. However, on the long wall, you have a loading system on a belt line on one end, and 800 to 1,000 feet was the other end, and a continuous system in between. And the long wall would cut 2 to 4 feet deep all the way across that. So you figure one pass with the long wall going across, he cut 2 feet deep by 6 feet high by 1,000 feet long. That's a tremendous amount of coal in one swipe. And then they turned around and came back the same way and did the same thing. It was getting much more coal for less labor. And that's what keeps companies floating. I know my brothers in the union, they go, that's not right, but that's the truth. That's what gave us their jobs. We kept our actions, the working we did kept the company going. Therefore, it provided for our jobs, and it provided for jobs in other parts of the company,
Right.
not just where we. And again, the bond is there for all of them.
Was yours from Germany, and theirs was from Joy Manufacturing Mason too?
So it
didn't
did. I think we had 4 different. Our first one was an Eichhoff, and that was one of the staples that they used at Moss too. Here again, Richard Light, FC. A lot of those men who came from the Moss 2 area, they were familiar with that type of equipment. And the foremans came and they knew how to move it. They knew how to maintenance it. They had certain speeds that they would go by, and it's like been in all industries. Next thing you knew, Joey came up and said, hey, we've got a long wall that runs twice as fast as that one. Let's try it. We between panels, and the management fits and say, well, let's see if that gives us a profit there.
Okay.
They would bring it in. Mitsubishi brought a long way in the same way. But generally the things with that, when another company, especially a foreign company came in, they brought their own mechanics. They brought their own staff. The staff at the mine would be with them to work on it, to maintenance it, but yet they were still responsible for it. And we got to try a lot of new equipment. Yeah.
Wow. We thank you for being here with us.
Yes.
Let's dig some coal. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you, Ben.